CBSE Board, Class 9, History, Chapter 2, Part 14, Audio by Renee Matthew. The ideology socialism and the appraisal of socialism, the formation of communist assembly, the formation of parties under Lenin and Stalin, all these things ignited the imagination and the hope of a new Russia. We know what happened after that. There was uprising from the peasants, and it was a time when the peasants really enjoyed the new freedom which they really longed for in Russia. But eventually, what happened after that? The government and the formation of the Bolshevik party under Lenin and Stalin started taking a new form. It started shaping into a new policy. And it grew aggressive and repressive day by day. So what was the global influence of the Russian Revolution and the USSR? Russia was an empire, a great empire, but not a very strong country. It was not a famous country. We saw in one of the audios that people were really scared, especially France, Britain and all these places, America, everybody was scared because the political strategy used by the Bolshevik party and all the other political parties in Russia was more pragmatic. It was more practical and obvious, and it really worked for 75% of it. So there will definitely be a global influence of this particular revolution, and it came to be known as the Soviet Union after that. The existing socialist parties did not completely approve of the Bolshevik measures. They did not get a majority. They were not able to take over after that. And they kept on confining themselves and not agreeing to the policies of Bolsheviks. But the possibility of a worker state, that was the common aim and objective of everybody in Russia. It fired the people's imagination across the world because everybody at that time was going through colonialism, imperialism, foreign rule, invasion and all these things, and they were bonded in the foreign grip. They were strangling every day. So the hope of a worker state where the normal people will have a say in the government, that was the dream of everybody. So look at this point. That is the first point for which everybody from across the world wanted to take over, just like Russia. And in many countries, especially some parts of Great Britain, communist parties were formed after this, like the Communist Party of Great Britain. Communism was the ideology they followed. It was so strong, it was different, it was exceptional. Those were the principles. And the Bolsheviks also encouraged one more thing. They encouraged all the colonial people, the people who were under the bondage of colonialism and imperialism, to follow the experiment. So, it is not that whatever is followed in Russia can be blindly followed in the other parts of the world. You will have to have another strategy and methodology to work it out in the other countries. In Russia, it worked out this way, but in other countries, not in the same way. But the same principles can be used, but in different ways. So that is dependent on the leaders and the governing body. But they encouraged everybody across the world to have an experiment on this. And many non-Russians, we saw that all the non-Russians were not encouraged in USSR, but many non-Russians from outside USSR participated in the Conference of the People of the East in 1920. That was a huge conference after this, and everybody started participating in it. And Comintern was a body founded by the Bolsheviks. What was it? It was an international union of pro-Bolshevik socialist parties, that is the people who supported Bolshevik. We know that there were so many other parties which were coming up outside the Bolshevik party. So many people were against the Bolshevism and they were supporting socialism but not Bolsheviks. Socialist, communism and nationalism, all these things combined to form these socialist parties. So this Bolshevik, they formed a body known as the Comintern. Now these are the pictures from establishing Comintern. You can see Lenin here, the body is formed. This is a picture, a photo from the newspaper of that time, they signing the agreement and forming the policies and all that. This is a famous combination of all the people of that time, and they wanted to come up as the governing body, and they did to an extent also. Okay, so these are some of the pictures which is not given in your textbook, but it will help you to understand the power which was there in Russia. And some also received education. We saw that some measures were taken to increase extended education. Do you remember that point where people had access, especially workers and farmers had access to universities? So similarly, some received education in the USSR's Communist University of the Workers of the East, and that is why they had joined this particular group. Do you remember that particular group, Conference of the People of East? Yes. So they started gaining their education from the University of the Workers of the East. And by the time of the outbreak of the Second World War, the USSR had given socialism a global face and world stature. So by Second World War, they had a rooted establishment of the socialism in all over the world. It is not only in Russia, but the impact was felt all over the world, and it was a kind of stepping stone to the next phase in the world, to the next phase of political development in the world. And by the 1950s, it was acknowledged and it was also known that within the country, the style of the government in the USSR was not in keeping with the ideas of the Russian Revolution. It's not that they always thought about the Russian Revolution and they supported blindly. That was not the case. It was not that they were always following the measures or thinking on it. Then what was it? So here we have a question on that. In the world, socialist movement too, it was recognized that all was not well in the Soviet Union. See, what we can understand by the end of the revolution is that everything was not pleasing in the USSR also, in spite of strong groups like Bolsheviks. Everything was not all right. But it set up a stepping stone to the political growth of the world. So it taught the other countries also to fight back. Yes, so it was a world socialist movement which came up, and that is what the title of this chapter also says. A backward country. Okay, Russia was known as a backward country, had become a great power. Its industries and agriculture had developed, and the poor were being fed. It was not like France. The backward country was able to fight back, and industries, agriculture, everything developed, and the poor were also fed. All positive points. But there is a big but there. It had denied the essential freedom to its citizens. Okay, so that is what happened with the Bolsheviks also. They came with lot of attitude. They came in with lot of policies and lot of aims and objectives to free people, to give equal rights to the peasants and workers, so that everybody will have equal rights and also will have equality in the government, in the representation of the government, politics and all that. But what happened? It finally became aggressive. It started repressing even the basic freedom of the citizens. And that was very dangerous. Look at this word, essential freedom to its citizen was denied. And that was the collapse. That was the problem. And it carried out its developmental projects through repressive policies. I hope this point is very clear. Repression will not work out every time. Okay, people will have a say and they will start reacting. And by the end of the 20th century, what happened? The international reputation of the USSR as a socialist country had declined. The international stature that USSR had by the end of the 20th century started disintegrating, and it was recognized that socialist ideals still enjoyed respect among its people. So though the stature of USSR went down, though the stature of this particular country went down, it is not that socialism did not enjoy a good role in the face of global political development. Everybody had respect for socialism, and that is the power of socialism. But in each country, the ideas of socialism were rethought It was thought over again. They did not follow the mechanism and the methodology used in Russia. They had their own perspectives and they knew how to bring it about in their country. It was rethought with a different perspective in a variety of different ways. Now, it is not that Russian Revolution impact was not felt in India. This particular extract is very important. Writing about the Russian Revolution in India. Among those the Russian Revolution inspired were many Indians. Many Indians got influenced. Several attended the Communist University because that was a great conference, and even the Communist Party was formed in India. Its member kept in touch with the Soviet Communist Party there in Russia, and it had a great political impact. Cultural figures also took an interest in it, and they also visited Russia. Among them were Jawaharlal Nehru, Rabindranath Tagore, who wrote about Soviet socialism. So everybody, the educated and the political leaders, the figures of those days were greatly influenced by this ideology. In India, writings gave impressions of Soviet Russia, so everybody started to write about it. And in Hindi, R.S. Avasthi wrote in 1920 to 21 Russian Revolution, Lenin, his life and his thoughts, and later the Red Revolution, very famous books. Okay, S.D. Vidyalangar wrote The Rebirth of Russia and the Soviet State of Russia. All these books are very important, which gives an insight to what happened in those days. These books were also written in Bengali, Marathi, Malayalam, Tamil and Telugu. So much of influence. We have communist parties in our country also, and this is from where it took its trigger. This is from where we got socialism, from the ideas of Lenin and Stalin. Now, what did Rabindranath Tagore write from Russia in 1930? We saw that he visited Russia. What did he write? It's very important to follow these lines. Please look into your textbook if you have a soft copy. Otherwise, please listen. Moscow appears much less clean than the other European capitals. None of those hurrying along the streets look smart. The whole place belongs to the workers. So everybody, everywhere you can see the workers taking over. They were so happy. Here, the masses have not in the least been put in the shade by the gentleman. Gentleman means he's digging at the people who were belonging to the higher strata of the society, the rich people. Okay, those who lived in the background for ages have come forward in the open today. So those people who were in the dark, like the people who were not able to get their representation in the government or even to have their voice in the society, have come forward now. So that is the change. I thought of the peasants and workers in my own country. So at that time he's thinking of what is happening in India. It all seemed like the work of the genie in the Arabian Nights. So I hope you know the character genie in the Arabian Nights, a supernatural figure. So he's talking about that it is as if a genie came and just did some magic and there was a lot of change in this particular place. It all seemed like the work of the genie in the Arabian Nights only a decade ago. They were as illiterate, helpless and hungry as our own masses. So the workers in my country, that is in India, also face the same problem. They were also helpless and hungry, and even here. But look at what genie has done here. It is as if the genie has come and waved and did some magic here that workers have come to the front, and it is only the work of the great political leaders and the people's cooperation. Who could be more astonished than an unfortunate Indian like myself? So he's calling himself unfortunate, to see how they had removed the mountain of ignorance and helplessness in these few years. So ignorance and helplessness were like two mountains, and they have just removed it just like that. Now, an Indian also arrives in Soviet Russia. So that was the point of view of Rabindranath Tagore. Now, another normal layman is writing in Soviet Russia in 1920. What is he writing? For the first time in our lives, we were seeing Europeans mixing freely with Asians. Usually Europeans, the white men, will never mix with the Asians. Now we can see that there is an amalgam of all the nationalities, both the Europeans and the Asians. On seeing the Russians mingling freely with the rest of the people of the country, we were convinced that we had come to a land of real equality. We saw freedom in its true light. I have highlighted some of the sentences here which brings in so much of feel, okay? We saw freedom in its true light. In spite of their poverty imposed by the counter-revolutionaries. Counter-revolutionaries means people who were not so revolutionary, and the imperialists, the people who always stood in the way of these people who wanted to bring about a change. People who stood in the way of the socialist workers. Now the people were more jovial. Jovial means jolly and very happy and satisfied than ever before. The revolution had instilled confidence and fearlessness in them. So these two qualities are very important in human beings. Once you don't have confidence, once you have fear, all these things will put a human being down. You should have confidence in yourself and you shouldn't be having fear of anything. The real brotherhood of mankind would be seen here among these people of 50 different nationalities. The real brotherhood, because 50 different nationalities were thriving here, and you can see the unity that is being enjoyed, the fellowship that is being enjoyed here. No barriers of caste or religion hindered them from mixing freely with one another. No caste, no religion, nothing created obstacles in them in mixing with one another. Every soul was transformed into an orator. Everybody spoke, everybody found, each citizen found his voice. One could see a worker, a peasant, or a soldier haranguing like a professional lecture. Everybody had experience, everybody had so much to speak on. Their life itself was an open book to the other parts of the world. And the source is Shaukat Usmani. The source is Historic Trips of a Revolutionary. It is written by this particular person, and the source is Historic Trips of a Revolutionary. If you can get hold of these sources, you will get an insight to what it really says. Now, some of the important dates in this chapter is given, but I would advise you to have a timeline of your own. Now, this is an example. Only the main dates are given in your textbook. 1850 to 1880s, you can see the debates over socialism in Russia. And then in 1898, formation of the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party. 1905 is very important for the Bloody Sunday and the revolution of 1905. Then you know what happened on those 2 days. 1917 saw two incidents. One is on 2nd March, that is the abdication of the Tsar. Very important turning point in the history of Russia. But still you can see that after that there were people who supported the Tsars. The white, do you remember that particular group? The white, green and the red? Yes. On 24th October, Bolshevik uprising in Petrograd. It's uprising, okay? So Bolsheviks started getting up, they started coming up, and they also started reducing the prices of many things in Petrograd, and that was not for the good of the workers. 1980 to 20, that is the duration of the Civil War. 1919, formation of the Comintern. 1929, beginning of collectivization. These are only the important dates from the chapter, but you will have to work a little more and create your own timeline with pictures if you want, or otherwise at least a timeline which will help you to understand things better.